October 25th, 1415. You're standing in a freshly plowed field in northern France. The ground beneath your feet, it's not solid. It's a sucking, clinging, ankle-deep nightmare of mud that's already stolen the boots of men around you. 25,000 French knights, the most feared warriors in Europe, are forming a wall of steel across that field. Their armor gleams, their horses stampede, their banners snap in the cold wind. And you're one of 6,000 English longbowmen. You're exhausted. You're hungry. You've been marching for weeks while dysentery tore through your ranks. You're so outnumbered it's almost laughable. But here's the thing they don't tell you in the history books. Those French knights aren't just preparing to attack. They're walking into a trap so perfectly laid that by nightfall, this muddy field will be carpeted with the flower of French nobility. 10,000 of them will never go home. And the weapon that destroys them? It isn't a secret invention. It isn't superior courage. It isn't divine intervention. It's mud, wooden stakes, and 6,000 men who could loose 12 arrows per minute into a sky that was about to turn black. This is the battle that shouldn't have happened, the victory that defied every rule of medieval warfare, and the massacre that historians still argue about 6 centuries later. This is Agincourt, and I'm about to show you exactly how 6,000 longbowmen drowned an army of French knights in mud, blood, and steel. How 6,000 longbowmen destroyed 25,000 French knights. The mud that changed history. Visualize this scenario. You're a military leader in medieval times, confronted by an opposing force triple the size of your own. Your soldiers are worn down, famished, and afflicted with illness following extended military operations. The opposition, completely rested, properly nourished, and featuring the most skilled mounted warriors across the continent. What course of action would you select? This precisely describes the circumstances confronting King Henry V on October 25, 1415, amid the marshy terrain of northern France. The result of this confrontation would transform everything medieval Europe understood regarding armed conflict. This represented more than merely a military triumph. It marked a watershed moment that revealed the weaknesses inherent in conventional feudal forces and proved how landscape, weaponry, and strategic planning could defeat simple numerical advantage. Currently, we're examining why Agincourt occurred, how events progressed, and what genuine significance it held for subsequent military operations. Because the widely accepted version of this encounter, it omits numerous significant elements. Before we proceed further, kindly select the subscription option immediately. To comprehend Agincourt properly, we need to grasp why Henry V entered French territory initially. England and France had been engaged in what we currently term the 100 Years' War beginning in 1337. However, come 1415, a temporary ceasefire existed. Henry could have chosen to preserve peaceful relations. Therefore, what prompted renewal of hostilities? The explanation involves internal political matters and hereditary aspirations. Henry had assumed rulership over a realm still recuperating from internal disorder. His predecessor, Henry IV, had claimed authority through rebellion, and rightful succession stayed questionable. Achieving foreign military victories provided proven methods for medieval sovereigns to consolidate their realms and quiet opponents. Beyond political considerations, Henry firmly considered himself entitled to the French crown through his great-great-grandmother. Medieval rules concerning inheritance via female relatives remained ambiguous, with both factions presenting reasonable cases. Henry wasn't purely aggressive. He sought what he viewed as his lawful entitlement. During that warm season, Henry started his expedition by laying siege to Harfleur, a crucial harbor within Normandy. He successfully took it, though paying heavily. Intestinal infection, which medieval forces referred to as the flowing blood, spread rapidly through his soldiers. Contemporary calculations indicate he probably sacrificed approximately 1/3 of his troops to sickness alone, not fighting. With colder weather approaching, plus his military force diminished, Henry took an action appearing foolhardy. Move northeast toward Calais, the English-controlled harbor traveling through enemy French countryside. Did this represent tactical genius or hopelessness? Military scholars continue debating this point. Certain historians contend Henry aimed to showcase English military capability deep within adversarial territory. Alternative perspectives claim he basically required moving his troops out before they collapsed utterly. Whichever interpretation, the French recognized an opening. Here's something frequently ignored. Considering the French viewpoint, obstructing Henry's path to safety represented completely logical military strategy. The French military hadn't remained inactive. While Henry advanced northward, French military leaders gathered an enormous fighting force specifically designed to stop him. This incorporated Charles d'Albret, the French constable and highest military authority, in addition to various counts and aristocrats heading soldiers from throughout the realm. They possessed superior quantities. They owned mounted soldiers. They possessed combat knowledge. Most critically, they possessed compelling reasons. They didn't require that capability. A longbow could propel an arrow approximately 230 meters. At extended distances, projectiles could penetrate the less protective covering on arms and legs. Facial visors contain narrow viewing openings susceptible to fortunate strikes, and war horses represented exposed targets with inferior shielding compared to their riders. However, the true effectiveness of the longbow wasn't based on individual killing capacity. It stemmed from shot concentration. A skilled archer could release 10 to 12 arrows per minute. Henry commanded roughly 5,000 longbowmen. Calculate the numbers. That equals approximately 50 to 60,000 arrows per minute filling the sky. Even assuming most miss or deflect off metal protection, the mental and physical effect proves devastating. Envision yourself positioned among the French forward lines. You're observing a dark mass of projectiles curving toward your position. You're hearing horses shriek as arrows strike them. You're witnessing comrades around you collapsing. Your sight through your helmet is already restricted. The sound is overwhelming. And you're struggling to move through mud that resists every step. This demonstrates where the English battle approach truly excels. They weren't depending on individual weapon superiority. They constructed a coordinated approach, landscape directing enemy movement, pointed stakes disrupting mounted attacks, and concentrated archery creating mental paralysis and accumulating casualties. When the French mounted soldiers ultimately approached the English positions, they were disorganized, physically spent, plus their animals were terrified. The embedded stakes performed exactly their intended function, and the cavalry assault disintegrated. Following their mounted forces' failure, the French sent forward their foot soldiers, thousands of armored troops wearing complete plate protection, wielding pole arms, metal clubs, plus two-handed swords. This represents where fighting became extraordinarily savage. The restricted space squeezed the French troops. They couldn't utilize their numerical superiority successfully because they simply couldn't position sufficient soldiers into the combat front. Meanwhile, troops in the rear lines kept advancing forward, generating massive crowding. Henry's armored soldiers maintained the central position, battling on foot. Medieval combat at this intensity wasn't refined swordplay. It represented draining, close-distance brutality, polearms engineered to penetrate metal armor, hammers designed to crush helmets and induce brain trauma, knives to locate openings in plate joints. The English faced numerical disadvantage in hand-to-hand fighting, yet they possessed two vital advantages. Initially, they battled on relatively firm terrain, whereas the French had drained themselves reaching the English formation. Secondly, and this represents the clever tactical maneuver regularly ignored, the English longbowmen on the edges didn't merely release arrows and observe. After exhausting their projectiles, they abandoned their bows and assaulted the French sides using heavy hammers, small axes, and blades. Since they lacked heavy armor protection, they could move quicker through the muddy ground. This generated a surrounding movement. The French discovered themselves trapped on three directions, packed so densely that numerous individuals couldn't effectively wield their weapons. Period documents describe something terrifying. French armored fighters slipping in the mud, plus becoming unable to stand because of their metal equipment's heaviness and the crowd of bodies. Certain individuals were crushed by their fellow soldiers, others drowned in the mud itself. At one moment, Duke John of Alençon penetrated to Henry personally and struck the ruler's crown using his blade, bending it. Henry's protection team eliminated the noble, and the sovereign continued fighting. This wasn't symbolic direction from safety. Medieval monarchs were anticipated to engage in combat, and Henry certainly did. By late morning, the French attack had entirely failed. Thousands lay dead or seized. The English started gathering captives, standard procedure for exchanging nobles for payment. So there it is, the real story of Agincourt. 25,000 French knights rode onto that field, expecting glory. By sunset, 10,000 lay dead in the mud, not because the English were braver, not because God favored one side over the other, but because one commander looked at a bottlenecked field, a week of rain and 6,000 archers, and saw something his enemies couldn't. A battlefield isn't just ground, it's a weapon. Henry V understood that. The French nobility, they understood honor. They understood cavalry charges. They understood that when you outnumber your enemy 3-1, you're supposed to win. They never stopped to ask, what if the ground itself fights against you? A historian walking across the same field today, now peaceful farmland, then cut to reenactors in period costume, then to paintings of the battle, then to soldiers in modern combat gear. But here's the question that keeps military historians up at night, and I want you to really think about this. We look at Agincourt and we see a medieval battle, old weapons, old armor, old ideas, but the pattern, it never went away. The confident side that outnumbers its enemy, the assumption that traditional methods always work, the failure to adapt to terrain, to technology, to circumstances happening in real time. Sound familiar? From the trenches of the Somme to the jungles of Vietnam, from deserts to mountains to cities, armies keep learning Agincourt's lesson, and armies keep forgetting it. So here's what I want to know, and drop this in the comments because I genuinely want to hear your take. If you were commanding that French army, knowing everything you know now, the mud, the stakes, the longbows, the narrow field, what would you have done differently? Would you have waited them out, taken a different route, used your own archers differently? Or would you, like the French nobility, have charged anyway because retreat felt like shame? Because here's the terrifying thing about history.